morning, everyone. And as Christine has just kindly introduced me as the convener of the RISCAuthority Security Group, this comprises representatives of most of the insurance companies transacting property insurance business in this country. Now, I must open with a bit of an apology. I've had a cold, and it's been clear the last few days my speech is not what it should be. We will crack on, but I'm having to speak quite softly, and I may need to mute this mic from time to time to have a cough and a splutter and a drink. So I do apologize for that. If there are silences, we're still here. We will return, but if I completely grind to a halt, my colleague Dominic will make my excuses for me. So just a few words of introduction as to what can be expected this morning. So our aims this morning are to look at the fundamentals of CCTV, but not to dwell on the fundamentals too long, but just to, because after all, this is not a tutorial as such. We're going to be quite selective in what we talk about. But we're going to talk about why CCTV has a role and why you think you might need it. It's not a tutorial, as I say. We may border on the technical, but there's absolutely no danger of that border being crossed, so you can relax. We're going to spend some time on privacy disciplines because these are of increasing importance, and then we'll move on to some developments and special applications. We're not talking about the public sector here. We're talking about private users of CCTV, but these days that does extend into educational, medical, and even local authorities. Other views are available. You may hear me comment or give an opinion about something, and in the time-honored fashion, I suppose I should say, these views are my own. They're not those of the proprietor necessarily. So we'll take about 30 minutes with questions at the end, time and voice permitting. What is CCTV? Or rather, perhaps these days we should say, what is VSS? Now, the international standards body, the IEC, has ordained that from now on, CCTV, closed-circuit television, is to be known as VSS, video surveillance systems. Defiantly, however, in this session, we're going to stick to good old CCTV. It's that way that we're all going to know what we're talking about, and we don't really like change, do we? So why is it closed circuit television? Well, the answer is, I think most of those online this morning know it's a closed system, unlike terrestrial television, which anyone can pick up with a receiver off the ether, if you like. It's an imperfect definition, but it's the best that can be done. And coincidentally, it's for environmental management. It's for an operational management purpose. It's not for entertainment, although plenty of people seem to think otherwise. I apologize for the rustling of paper, but I've got no speaker's notes this morning, so we move on. So we're always invited, when it comes to CCTV, to ask ourselves why we think CCTV is necessary. If you can answer in the affirmative to question 1, then fine. But I think if you're in any way uncertain, these questions are very powerful in drawing your attention to what actually you're trying to achieve with a system and how you're going to go about putting in place all the arrangements to make it work. I'll just let you read that while my voice recovers. It's questions 5 and 7 that, to me, this is personal, but to me, I've found that this is where people stumble. They think, well, I need CCTV. I think that's probably the easiest way to go, but they don't actually work out who's going to observe these images. Do we have a member of staff to do so? Over what time period? And then moving to number 7, if a response is required, who actually is going to make that response? And it may not necessarily be a crime we're looking at, but it may need a response. So what are we going to put in place? So I said we would be talking about privacy quite a lot this morning. I'll make no apology for that, as they say. Starting with the 6 slides that follow, including this one, are on the subject of privacy. It's a big issue for CCTV, unlike other physical property solutions, security solutions, in that it's quite unique. And if you look at the Information Commissioner's Code of Practice, which was first published 15 years ago, these are some extracts from it, which make it quite clear that although you're looking at images, you are actually capturing personal data, personal information about a living individual, citizen of this country. And that is personal data. Furthermore, the code is applicable to all users of CCTV, irrespective of size. So this is from the largest industrial location down to, as they say in their code, the local tobacconist and newsagent. It's everybody who's a user. And it is countrywide. Now, the whole positioning of the Code of Practice is very much that, look, we are the guardian and the policeman for the Data Protection Act, and this is the law. This Code of Practice is to help you stay within the law, but you must take action to ensure that you do conform to and comply with the law of the land. If you do nothing, you risk breaking the law. So it's quite pointed. And incidentally, I shall refer to the Information Commissioner's Office from now on as the ICO. And these are the responsibilities, or I guess the chief responsibilities extracted from the Data Protection Act, and specifically the code I've just talked about. Now, time doesn't allow us to go into these in any detail. So the best advice I can give you is to download the code and have it to hand, study it if you can, at least refer to it when in doubt, depending on what your role is vis-a-vis this technology. I'd just pick 3 things, I suppose, almost at random from this shopping list to give you a flavor of the kind of responsibilities you have when you have a CCTV system. You need to appoint a responsible person. It could be the data controller. You need to erect approved warning signs to a certain format. And let me see, where is it on this slide? Yes, it's the penultimate bullet point on the right-hand column. You need to facilitate subject access. That means that if somebody who's been captured by your system asks to see his images or her images, they're perfectly entitled to do so under the DPA, Data Protection Act. They can come in and view their image, or you will need to send them a DVD. And for this, you will receive the princely sum of £10. This £10 fee has been unchanged ever since I can remember. There is a simplified code, as they describe it, for the small user. They have in mind this tobacconist shopkeeper again. Well, I've looked at it, and as far as I could see, it includes pretty much everything on your screen now, with the exception of documentation and training of staff. Now, more recently, an additional body concerned purely with CCTV and privacy type issues has come along, spawned by the Protection of Freedoms Act, or the POFA, P-O-F-A. Now, this is a piece of legislation that came in during the coalition government, driven by the likes of Mr. David Davis, and it's referred to as a civil liberties measure. I think the background was the feeling that we were becoming, there was too much Big Brother, and it all needed a little bit of control. And the SCC, as I shall refer to him, is the Surveillance Camera Commissioner, and there is the Surveillance Camera Commissioner on screen, Mr. Tony Porter. He's an ex-police officer. Now, unlike the ICO code I spoke of just now, this code only, at the present time, touches so-called relevant authorities in England and Wales. And the relevant authorities are essentially the police and the local authorities. Now, the key point about the SCC is that its remit as the policeman as the supervisor of these matters for the police and local authorities, or rather, I shouldn't say the supervisor, but the privacy standard setter for those bodies. He is extending his reach shortly into the private sector. It was already encouraged under the legislation that the private sector should have, take notice and try and observe the code that he has published. But it may become sharper than that in the future. And although I should say the SCC doesn't have statutory teeth as such as does the ICO, so there are subtle differences between these two bodies. It's rather confusing. It doesn't have teeth. It can't take you to task in law. However, Mr. Porter makes it very clear that if you end up in court over a privacy matter, and you cannot claim that you have done everything you can to observe his code, then your case is, to say the least, not helped. Now, the SCC code contains 12 guiding principles. I've just picked two, and one speaks of the system having a specified purpose with a legitimate aim. And here are the, I think, most important three words: an identified pressing need. And secondly, the system must be so set up that it has the aim of processing images and information which are of evidential value. Now, these are terms that arrived with the SCC, 2 or 3 years ago now. But following these terms, in fact, were not in the ICO code, but following the signing of a memorandum of understanding between these two bodies, the ICO and the SCC, they now both use these terms in their codes. Now, unless these principles are somehow modified for the private sector into which he is moving, I just wonder how they're going to be implemented, because in the English language, a need that is pressing is one that requires quick or immediate action or attention. So what I'm interested to know is whether it will mean that we can't use systems as we do now as a proactive, protective risk management measure on a crime prevention basis as we do with any other security measure like intruder alarms and physical barriers. In other words, do we have to sit there and wait to be hit by a crime and incur a loss and create a pressing need before we can install? And the second principle that, or the second of my selection principles, that in fact television images should always be of evidential value. He's talking about the court process, justice system. Now, the to be of evidential value is quite a demanding standard, requiring lots of camera views and some very high quality video. But then for a large proportion of the systems we are involved with, we're not striving to capture images of evidential view because we're quite happy with the system functioning to detect intrusion, for example, to observe what's going on, and to recognize individuals, but not to identify them. And those three words, detection, observation, and recognition, pop up again later this morning. So here's a nice, one of these scary modern call images, just to frighten you. But don't be frightened. I think with a little bit of preparation and awareness really would be the word, you can navigate through all this. Household users has been a development here. When it comes to systems operated by householders, homeowners, they had till recently been considered exempted from the DPA, but it's now been clarified by the European Union Court of Justice that if the camera views even partially leak into a public space, such as the public footpath or thoroughfare, or indeed into your neighbour's garden, it is subject to the Act, and the owner, the householder, will need to observe all the disciplines I spoke of a few minutes ago. Furthermore, the ICO and the SCC are said to be preparing a scheme, special scheme. So you may think this is overkill, but then I didn't say that. Applications. Okay, well, the applications for CCTV, I think many amongst the listeners this morning already know how the role they find for it, and I'm sure the role they have for it, which would depend on the kind of business either you have yourself or the kind of business a client of yours needs to protect. The needs and purposes vary, but let's just take in a few. If you have a situation where the potential offenders that could do you damage may be on your premises, but you can't differentiate them from legitimate law-abiding people on your premises, such as would be the situation in an art gallery or hospital, then you have a layer of security here that employs human intelligence and a smart level of security on top of all the other measures you've taken to prevent, let's say, theft and damage. Second bullet there, when physical security itself is not enough. And we all know from the greatly entertaining images from last Easter of the, what was it now, 3 meter thick, or was it 3 foot thick? Anyway, it was a thick concrete wall penetrated by thieves at Hatton Garden. There weren't persuasive CCTV pictures that would have got the police to appreciate that this was for real and that they really needed to batter the door down, get in there and make feel some collars, as they say. So CCTV has very much a role as a complementary measure with physical systems. And finally, I should also say, if you have conversely quite a different, the other end of the scale, if you have a huge site, let's say 10, 20 acres, and you have a lot of luxury cars on it, then again, it's really not cost effective to put a perimeter around that, an effective perimeter at least, and you need backing up with CCTV. And finally, covert systems. Have a look at the code on covert. Covert, although you may not yourself have a need for it, but your client, your policyholder may, it is permitted to have a covert system, although you need to have a very good case and you need to record your case in writing. For example, if you have a continuing and ongoing spate of staff thefts in the office, then a covert system could be acceptable, but it doesn't relieve you from the responsibility of privacy issues. You still need to be careful where the cameras are placed, e.g. toilets, etc. This is pretty unique to CCTV, at least the degree of pressure on us all, to always ensure we have considered what our operational requirement is for a system. So make a thorough and systematic assessment of your security risk and ensure you understand what you're trying to achieve with the system, and then commit it to paper. Visualize where you want to be once this system is installed and is protecting you. And the stress placed on operational requirement is pretty unique to CCTV. There's a plethora of guidance on the subject, and if you ask a question at the end, I can tell you where to go for that. I did say I'd return to the subject of those three words: detection, observation, recognition. You see, there are 6 criteria or standards in the international standards for these different terms, and these are the 6 standards, and they're in terms of screen height, starting at the lowest 5% and the highest is 400%. So 5% is a very distant figure, as you can see. 400% is a target individual, his upper chest and face filling, so it's filling 400% screen height, rather than the 100%, as you can see below, being his entire body. But only 400 is the degree of magnification for that standard, which is known as inspection. So I'm not going to dwell on the bottom and the top, the 5% and the 400%. These are the 4 target height standards that we are most interested in when it comes to property protection. And you can see there they are: 10% detection, 25% observation, 50% recognize, 100% identify. And if you use these terms, that is to say detect, observe, recognize, identify, in your specifications, for example, detect persons in the yard, identify persons seeking access to the cash office, then the CCTV industry and the consultancy industry know exactly what you're talking about, because you're using the definition word from the international standard. And these target performances can be camera to camera. So you can see from there that at 100%, you would need 100% to identify the individual to the satisfaction of a court of law. However, you may well not require the number of cameras and the infrastructure to achieve that all throughout your site. You may be quite happy with the 50%. I think a lot of the time I would be. Test targets are in use in this business, and you should try and persuade and ensure that the installing industry use these targets. They're sometimes a bit reluctant, but this is the only way you'll know for sure that you're achieving those standards we spoke of, and to the correct quality of the picture. And on the right are the images that of faces. You have to be able to discriminate between those faces in order to comply with the identification standard. So it's unique to the identification standard. I won't go through all the different types of cameras because time doesn't allow it, but you could argue that high definition cameras are a more recent development. Ask for a 1080p camera. This will give you 2 megapixels and upwards, but bear in mind that you need more light for a high definition picture. And it all hangs together, so you'll need a high definition lens and a high definition monitor. Furthermore, you're collecting an awful lot of digital information, a lot of data, and therefore it has an impact on your image recording and storage, and on your bandwidth if it's a networked camera. So I understand from the business that this was going to multiply the need for storage capacity and bandwidth by a factor of 5. Here we see an example, the large picture at the top, of a high-definition image. Let's see if I can use this magic pointer. So you see these shadowy figures here are barely visible. But this is, if you knew these people, you'd recognize them quite quickly. Similarly, this car, look how distant this car is. You can read its number plate clearly, you can see the make and model. So if you think you have a reason, and bear in mind, modern digital color cameras are very good. If you feel you do need this level of quality, then it is available, but everything else must support it. Suddenly I can't move. I'll use the arrow. So, where there's no usable light, we spoke earlier of the need for light. If there's absolutely no light, well, one of the options is to use a thermal camera. If your need is to recognize, or not recognize, if your need is to detect people infiltrating, for example, and you're not too concerned about detail of their appearance, because you won't get it with this, you do have the option of using thermal, and as a bonus, you will have a technology here that leaves much less doubt as to whether or not there is a target present in the view of the camera. They can see in total darkness, but not only that, they can see through dust, fog, smoke, all weather conditions. They can see targets hidden in shadows and hiding behind undergrowth, because of course they are registering the infrared radiation from the targets. But you won't be able to use these images in the criminal justice system, probably not anyway, because of the lack of detail as to facial features and what have you. In the old days, doesn't seem very long ago to me, but I suppose it is, video cassette recorders were the only available method of recording video, and this is what you ended up with, a huge tape library, and all these tapes had to be erased, indexed, stored, recorded, and it was a nightmare. And I think you probably know that we've now moved on to the digital video recorder. These aren't exactly like your home DVR, because they are needed 100% of the time, 100% duty cycle, and so they're much more rugged and durable. And the prices of disk storage have dropped like a stone these last few years. And you can get huge capacities for a modest outlay now. Even so, so-called real-time video is so hungry of storage space that even a large capacity disk will be overwritten sooner than you think. And of course, as new material overwrites the old is lost. What's more, if you keep images, and I was going to say, if you're trying to keep images for 14 to 31 days, which is a typical window, you may have to pay quite a lot of money, even today, if you've got several cameras. that why would you want to keep your images so long? Mostly, for most situations, you know whether or not you'll need to keep pictures after a day, maybe 2 or 3 days at the outside. Now, the bottom bullet there speaks of trade-offs. Because capacity does have a limit, albeit the disks are higher capacity now, there are 2 trade-offs that the industry uses that you must be aware of. The first is the refresh rate. Now, this is the rate at which each complete image builds up on the screen, and real-time television runs at 25 full frames a second. And you can reduce the number of frames per second down to something like 6 or perhaps even lower, and you won't perceive much of a difference because the eye can't see such short changes as a difference between 6 and 25 in a second. But as you reduce and reduce and reduce the frame rate, of course, there is the possibility of a staggering type of image which might miss certain events, and that's the last thing you want. Now, the second trade-off is one referred to as image compression. In a CCTV image, even if there's a car or a person moving across it, a large amount of the picture actually remains unchanged from picture to picture. And so the way compression works is that only the changes in the image are captured and passed on down the system, thus reducing the total data that's required to be captured by the system and the image storage recording system. However, you can only play this trick up to a certain point. If you keep winding up the compression ratio, you will come to the point where the picture is no longer fit for your purpose. Everything returns to the operational requirement. What is your purpose? If the pictures don't match your purpose, then I'm afraid you'll have to spend more on storage or think again. Now, here are a couple of examples of a compressed image. Now, you see on this is a compressed image. And that's not a bad image, actually, if all you're looking for is a general overview of anything major happening at that junction, intersection. However, I don't think you can read the number plates, so I can't on my screen here. But maybe that's not in your operational requirement. You take the next image, same image, but look, we have got a higher ratio of compression. Now, that's not too clever. For example, on the left of the screen, there's a grassy verge. If it was Dallas, it would be called a grassy knoll. And if it was Dallas, you'd want to know if those figures are something yellow, is it a man with a yellow top and blue trousers? Actually, it wasn't a man, it was a sign. So that may not fit your operational requirement. With television, the more light, the better, even light across the whole scene. Color cameras, however, and the majority, I assume these days are color cameras, they're quite fussy. So they need white light, pure white light, or they like pure white light, put it that way. So these days we'd have the benefit of white LED light, which is the image on the right, the street scene, and look how good the color rendition is. And on the left, again, a whitish light, metal halide. I think that has a pretty immediate strike time being the interval between switching it on and it coming to full volume, full luminosity. So that's a good system for television. Now, if you're not permitted to use lighting, visible lighting, then your only fallback is infrared lighting. But infrared lighting has a limited range. It's improved an awful lot over the years, and it's now reliable, inexpensive, and its maintenance costs are much reduced because it doesn't use bulbs anymore. However, you can't get color rendition with infrared lighting. Your image will be monochrome. Furthermore, the image will be a little bit strange at times. In this case, that individual is wearing man-made fibers. And look at the difference between the tie and the trousers on the left-hand image, which is captured in visible light, and the right-hand image is captured in infrared. And that's because the high reflectivity in man-made fibers at infrared wavelengths has the effect of inverting color. You can tell I was reading from my note there. I didn't know that, but there you are. It is not brilliant, but that may be all you can achieve. Now, until recently, we had a technology that was sometimes applied called video motion detection, which merely registered changes in the pixels of an image indicative of something moving in the scene, but it was a bit crude. And in fact, I don't know whether you've been watching BBC 4's program, The Brain. In an early program, there was a Paralympics skier, an American, who had been blind since 2 years old, and he got his sight back when he was in his late 40s, and he suddenly became not a very good skier. He had been a champion skier, and he went from being a champion skier to a useless skier because he said, I don't know, I see these black objects coming up. I can't tell whether it's a person, a tree, a shadow, or a hole. And that's exactly the problem that video motion detection had. It wasn't discriminatory. But since then, a new technology has come along in the last few years, video content analysis, which is part of video analytics. Now, video content analysis performs analysis on images using algorithms, and each of these algorithms has a different purpose, perhaps all to recognize objects, but their movements and behaviors, different types of movement, different types of behaviors. And there are, I'll let you read that, I won't read it. These are the various functions that video content analysis is used for. I'll just pick two of those, loitering and sterile zone, because they're perhaps those two, and plus I suppose abandoned baggage or abandoned objects. Those three are of interest if you are a property protector or a terrorist security preventer, because the others there are more to do with site management and so on. Of course, except for the one at the end, which is a bonus area, you do get smoke detection for most of these, and they automatically, through the way they operate, tell you if they're being tampered with. But loitering will tell you if an individual, for no very good reason as far as you can see, has arrived in the protected area and is loitering. This will alert an operator, and the operator can then decide what kind of action is required. And sterile zone refers to the area around a protected site where you may want to see if you have, if people invade and their behaviors are suspicious. This is the point, because there are all sorts of ways you can detect the perimeter of a zone. But what this does is it greatly reduces false alarms. And at this point, moving to the next slide, if Christine is listening, she can show video clip number 1, which is the loitering clip. This looks like a railway station. A lot of people seem pretty stationary to me, but there's a bit of movement. One individual seems to be standing on the spot. Oh, there you go, loitering. Now, this is an early stage for this technology. And you can show video 2, Christine. You can show video 2 if you're there. And here we see the sterile zone program running, fence attack. So here well, it's pretty obvious that they are going to attack the fence, but that can be programmed to eliminate an awful lot of the false alarms you would get from other systems, and this is the great benefit. Oh, Elton John, good. Now, I'm not sure if the audience have been returned. Right, good. Oh, good, right. I'm now the presenter again. So that was a little detour we made there. And so here we have another loiterer, to deal with, standing in a corridor. Now this slide is about the various, well, the only actually certification arrangement that is in existence. And even now, well, I'm told this is rapidly falling out of date. And this reveled in the name of ILIDS, I''Lids, and it was originally started by the police scientific development people. They've passed it all over to the CPNI, which is the Centre for the Protection of National Infrastructure, who in turn have contracted with the BRE, the British Research Establishment, to conduct the tests and issue the certificates. However, there are only certain functions that are being certificated, and if I guess I could say that if a supplier can claim they're certificated to the function you're interested in, then you have a degree of comfort there. But those that don't have certification for their function doesn't necessarily mean their system is of no use. It's just a sort of added level of comfort, as I say. And finally, this is an application that is very much liked by insurers who have property in the open. BS8418 Detector-activated CCTV is a hybrid of intruder alarm systems and CCTV. They're quite popular with insurers because you get the best of both worlds, and you get CCTV surveillance for a relatively good price because you haven't got, you pay the fee for this, but you don't have to have observers on site. And they are the only CCTV adaptation that enjoys the privilege of a police unique reference number. So you get a good response and you get access to the control room via the privilege line. When a detector activates, it brings up an image in this operational center or one like it. Here you have detectors by the look of it, and the camera is observing precisely the same field of view as the detector, we hope. And an image of what's going on is presented to one of these operators. The great benefit being that the operator can see what happened in the moments before the detector triggered, and at the time it triggered and immediately after. So it's quite powerful in discriminating false alarms from others. And most of the time, ne'er-do-wells or whoever's on your site, who perhaps are trespassers rather than potential burglars, can be scared away using what's called audio challenge. Here are the audio challenge loudspeakers. Sorry, I need to remove the arrow. Look, as I say, the vast majority of alarm events are actually filtered out, and that's what the customer is paying for. I mean, there may be hundreds, or if not thousands, of activations on a large system every year, and hardly any are ever presented to police, so that's what you pay for. If you have a non-British standard 8418 detector-activated system, I'm afraid you will not have the privilege of the URN system. You'll have to use the 999 with all the vagaries of the 999. If you're out of area, you might not get your message through, and it will all be delayed, and the police may not want to take action anyway because yours is not an approved system. I think that pretty much is enough for today. So what we've seen, particularly video content analysis, has huge potential. It's really just in its infancy. But will the potential be realized? Well, I think that partly depends on the privacy lobby and what they're going to permit. So we may do this in more detail on another occasion, in which case I can then talk about things like drones, which will have moved on a bit, and facial recognition and such things. On the bottom right there is an image of the one document we have done in RISCAuthority. It's a free download from RISCAuthority.co.uk. So thank you for listening. And a recording of this webinar is going to be made available on the website. And the next webinar will be on the subject of water mist on Friday, the 8th of April. And I'll just quickly look through the questions because we've run out of time, really. Yes, Elspeth's asking if we can arrange a link to the ICO website. That will be done. That it. Okay, that's an easy one. So I think now that as we've taken through, because my voice is so feeble, we've overrun a bit. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll join again to talk about water mist in April. Thank you. Goodbye.